Gregory lived in a quiet neighborhood in upstate New York. It was a peaceful place where the houses were spaced far apart from one another, separated by large open yards and thick patches of trees. Last December, Gregory found himself completely alone in his house for a whole week. His girlfriend had gone to stay with her parents for the holidays, but Gregory had to stay behind because of his work schedule. At first, he really liked the idea of the peace and quiet. Most of the people on his block had gone away for the Christmas break, so he had the entire street to himself. He thought he would get a lot of rest, catch up on some of his favorite television shows, and just enjoy the general coziness of the winter season. But what happened that week still lives rent-free in his head, and it completely changed how he feels about being alone in the dark. It was on his second night alone in the house. The time was around 6:30 in the evening, and because it was winter, it was already completely dark outside. It had been snowing lightly all day, leaving a fresh, thin layer of white snow covering his front yard and his driveway. Gregory was in the kitchen, preparing a very simple dinner of pasta and chicken. Normally, his girlfriend did all the cooking because Gregory was not much of a chef, but he was doing his best. To make the house feel a bit less empty, he had turned on the television in the background. As nice as it was to have the space to himself, the absolute quiet of the house was starting to feel a little too heavy. While he was sitting at the kitchen table eating his dinner, he suddenly heard a very unusual sound. It took him a second to process what he was hearing, because it was so out of place. It sounded like someone was singing. Gregory picked up the remote control, muted the television, and listened closely. The sound was definitely coming from outside his house. As he listened, the singing got a little clearer, and he realized the person was singing the classic holiday song Jingle Bells. At first, he thought maybe some neighborhood kids were playing around in the snow, but the voice did not sound like a kid at all. It was the deep, slow voice of a fully grown man. Gregory got up from the table and walked toward the front door, since that was the direction the sound seemed to be coming from. The closer he got to the entryway, the louder the singing got. By the time he reached the front door, the voice sounded like it was coming from right on his front stoop. He felt a strange, uneasy feeling in his stomach, but he tried to brush it off, thinking it was just an unusual Christmas caroler. He unlocked the door and pulled it open. Standing right there in the bright glow of his porch light was a man who looked to be around 35 years old. The man was not wearing a hat, and his coat looked far too thin for the freezing winter weather. But the strangest thing about him was that he was completely focused on singing Jingle Bells, staring down at the welcome mat as if he was not even aware that Gregory had opened the door. Gregory stood there and forced a polite, awkward smile because he did not know what else to do. He had never gotten Christmas carolers at his house before, and he certainly had never heard of a grown man doing it completely by himself. Usually, carolers traveled in groups. The man did not look immediately dangerous. He actually just looked somewhat confused, and Gregory wondered if he might have special needs, especially since he did not react to Gregory being there. He just kept singing Jingle Bells. When the man finished the song, Gregory expected him to say something, or at least turn and leave. But instead, the man took a deep breath and started singing Jingle Bells all over again from the very beginning, in the same slow off-key tone, except this time he looked up. He made direct, unblinking eye contact with Gregory. Gregory felt his polite smile completely drop. The situation had gone from slightly quirky to deeply uncomfortable. He stood there for another full minute, pretending to listen, hoping the man would stop after this second run. But he did not. He just looped the song again. Gregory checked his phone and realized nearly 4 minutes had passed, while this stranger stood on his porch, singing Jingle Bells over and over. Finally, Gregory decided he had experienced enough. He politely told the man thank you, and began to slowly close the front door. He thought that would send him on his way, but once the door was closed, he still heard the singing. It continued without even slowing down, echoing through the wood. Gregory walked back to the kitchen and sat down, trying to ignore the sound and finish his dinner. But the longer it went on, the harder it was to ignore. The man's behavior was completely abnormal, and it bothered him that a stranger was still standing right outside his door, singing the same song. Gregory wondered if someone else was out there with him, like a caregiver waiting near the street. But when he looked through the window, he did not see anyone else. The presence of the man made the whole house feel uncomfortable, like someone was standing too close to his personal space. The singing went on for the entire duration of Gregory's dinner, lasting for about 10 minutes straight, and then the voice suddenly stopped. The abrupt silence actually made Gregory jump, because he had gotten so used to the background noise. He got up slowly and walked back to the front door window to peer outside. He expected the man to be gone, but the man had simply moved. He was now standing at the very end of the driveway, completely still, facing the house. He was no longer singing. He was just standing in the snow, staring directly at the front door. Something about this felt much worse than the singing. The man looked like he was waiting. Gregory opened the front door just a crack and yelled out to him, telling him that this was private property, that he could not be there, and that he needed to leave immediately. The man did not move at all. The whole thing was so unnatural. Gregory finally told him that if he did not leave right now, he was going to call the police. Then, he shut the door again. Gregory watched him from the window for another minute, but the man did not budge. Gregory did not want to actually call the police because he thought there might be something mentally wrong with him, and he did not want to make things worse. So instead, he decided to just go upstairs, lock his bedroom door, and try to relax. Before he changed into his pajamas, he checked the upstairs window that faced the front yard. To his relief, the driveway was empty. The man was gone. Gregory figured the threat of the police had worked. He got into bed, turned on his lamp, and started reading his book to wind down for the night. About 20 minutes went by in peaceful silence, and then Gregory heard a sound from the back of the house. He knew instantly what it was, and his heart sank. It was the exact same man, singing Jingle Bells again. But this time it was coming from his backyard. Gregory jumped out of bed and rushed to the back window. When he looked down, he saw the man standing in the snow, directly below his bedroom window. The man was looking straight up at him while he sang. Gregory slid open the window and yelled down at him that he was calling the police immediately. The moment he said that, the singing stopped instantly. The man stood in total silence for about 3 seconds, staring up at Gregory. Then he suddenly burst into a full sprint toward the back door on the lower level. The second the man was out of Gregory's sight, a terrifying sound echoed through the entire house. The man started screaming at the top of his lungs. It was not a normal human scream. It sounded like a deranged, wild death metal singer, screaming with an insane, animalistic rage. The sound echoed across the yard and through the walls. Then came the heavy banging. The back door began to shake violently as the man began kicking it, throwing his body against the frame, and aggressively trying to rip the door handle off. Gregory could feel the physical vibrations of the impacts through the floor of his upstairs bedroom. He realized this man was not just weird, he was actively trying to break into the house. Gregory grabbed his cell phone and called 911 right away. He pleaded with the operator to hurry, telling them a man was trying to break through his back door. While staying on the line, Gregory grabbed a wooden baseball bat with his other hand. He backed into his bedroom closet, shut himself in, and pulled the door tight. The operator told him to stay hidden. Downstairs, the screams and the heavy banging continued. Every single second felt like an hour, and Gregory was convinced the door was going to give way. But then, just as suddenly as the violence had started, the banging stopped. Everything went dead silent, except for the sound of Gregory's rapid, shallow breathing. He did not know if the man had left, or if he had successfully gotten inside and was now silently walking through the house. Gregory stayed completely still in the closet until he finally heard the faint sound of sirens in the distance. The police had arrived. They searched the entire outside of the house and confirmed that the back door, while heavily scuffed, was still locked and secure. The operator told Gregory it was safe to come out. When Gregory stepped outside to meet the officers, the cold night air felt like a massive relief. He walked them to the backyard, where deep footprints in the snow showed exactly where the man had stood while singing, where he had run up to the back door, and where he had ultimately fled. The footprints led straight off the property and deep into the dense woods behind the house. The officers followed the trail for a short distance, but they came back, stating it was too dark and dangerous to search deep into the woods at night. They acted like it was not a big deal, telling Gregory that people act strange all the time, and that as long as his doors remained locked, he should be perfectly fine. Their lack of concern bothered Gregory, but he was too shaken to argue. After the police left, the house felt horribly cold and empty. Gregory spent the rest of the night double-checking every single lock. He was completely done with his alone time. The very next morning, he packed his bags and drove down to his parents' house for Christmas Eve and Christmas. Thankfully, the mysterious singer never returned, but Gregory never forgot the terrifying night Jingle Bells became a threat. But that was not the only unsettling event to happen during the holidays. Another chilling incident occurred about 10 years ago, during the holiday season of 2014. The narrator of this second story was only 6 years old at the time, having just celebrated his birthday in late November. He remembers the exact day of his birthday celebration because it happened to be the very same day that NFL player Odell Beckham Jr. made his famous, unbelievable one-handed catch. Even though the narrator was only 6 and did not really understand football, his entire family were massive Cowboys fans, while he was a Giants fan. The catch was talked about for the rest of the night, making his birthday week feel incredibly eventful. For his birthday, the boy received an amazing gift: tickets to see the Dallas Mavericks play the Washington Wizards on December 30th. Although he was actually a fan of the Cleveland Cavaliers, he lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, so he was very familiar with the Mavericks and was incredibly excited to attend his very first professional basketball game. To make the holidays even better, he received another Christmas gift: tickets to an earlier Mavericks game on December 27th, where they would play against the Oklahoma City Thunder. He was absolutely thrilled to have 2 games to look forward to. The day of the first game arrived, and the family made the 45-minute drive to the American Airlines Center. The Mavericks ended up winning a close, exciting game with a final score of about 112 to 105. The atmosphere inside the massive arena was electric, and for a 6-year-old child, it was an unforgettable experience. The next couple of days went by normally, but the young boy could not stop thinking about going back to that amazing stadium. On December 30th, they returned for the second game. This time, their seats were different. For the first game, they had incredibly nice seats, only 7 rows back from the court, right in the center. But for this game, they were seated around row 20 in a corner section, which made the experience feel much different. The game was going very well, and by halftime, the Mavericks were absolutely dominating, leading by 20 to 30 points. Being a young child, the boy was feeling restless and wanted to roam around the arena to get food and use the restroom by himself. However, since he was only 6 years old, his parents kept a close eye on him. During halftime, the family walked out to the concourse to get some concessions. The lines were incredibly long, and they waited for about 20 minutes. The father decided to walk over to another food stand to grab something specific, leaving the 6-year-old boy with his older brother, who was waiting in the main line to pay. While his brother was talking to the concession worker, the young boy decided to walk over to a trash can about 30 feet away to discard some candy wrappers. As he reached the trash can, a tall, white man suddenly approached him. The man looked down at him and asked him if he was lost. The boy, remembering his parents' warnings about talking to strangers, simply shook his head and did not say a word. But the man did not walk away. He told the boy that he did not see his parents anywhere nearby and suggested they go look for them together. Before the boy could protest, the man reached down, grabbed his hand, and began walking away with him. Because he was just a young kid, the boy did not scream or fight. He simply walked along, assuming this adult was trying to help him. The man led him away from the crowded lower concourse and started guiding him up toward the upper levels of the arena, near the nosebleed seats. The man explained that they were heading to the intercom station, so the staff could announce the boy's name and locate his parents. The boy nodded and continued to follow him. They eventually reached the very top level of the stadium, where it was incredibly quiet and empty. They stood there waiting for about 10 minutes. The boy noticed that the man seemed to be waiting, watching the surrounding area closely. Once the coast was completely clear and no other fans were in sight, the man suddenly tried to push the boy toward a set of heavy emergency exit stairs or an elevator. In that exact moment, the lessons of stranger danger rushed back into the boy's mind. A wave of intense guilt and pure terror washed over him. He realized with absolute certainty that he should not be with this man. The man was not wearing any official arena credentials or uniform. When the man briefly let go of the boy's hand to pull out his cell phone and check something, the boy seized his opportunity. He turned around and ran as fast as his small legs could carry him, sprinting back toward the main stands where the crowds were. As he fled, he glanced back over his shoulder and saw the tall man standing there, watching him run with a creepy, unsettling grin on his face. The boy ran through the concourse, desperately trying to find his section. He could not find his parents, but he did not care about that anymore. He just wanted to be somewhere safe and surrounded by people. Eventually, he managed to spot his older brother. Interestingly, his brother had not told their parents that the boy had gone missing because he was terrified of getting into trouble for losing him. When the brother asked if he was okay, the boy simply said yes, deciding to keep the terrifying encounter a secret. When the game ended, the Mavericks had won, but the boy could no longer enjoy the victory. He was completely silent as they walked out of the arena and got into the family car. His parents noticed his sudden lack of energy and asked him what was wrong, but he simply told them he was tired. As they drove home on the highway, the boy was on the verge of falling asleep in the back seat when a sudden, incredibly loud car horn and the screeching of tires shattered the quiet night. The sound was so intense that he almost screamed. He spun around and looked out the rear window. There, driving a truck directly behind them, was the exact same tall man from the arena. The truck pulled up right alongside their family car. Inside the truck, the boy could see the silhouettes of about 3 other men. His parents were startled by the aggressive driving and rolled down their windows to yell at the truck, but the men inside did not say anything. They just stared blankly at the family. The young boy wanted to scream, to tell his parents that this was the man who had tried to take him, but fear paralyzed him, and he remained silent. When they finally arrived home, the boy rushed straight to his bedroom and fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. But in the middle of the night, he woke up with a sudden, intense chill. He noticed a bright, flashing light reflecting against his bedroom window. He sat up, half expecting to see something innocent like Christmas lights, or even Santa Claus. But when he looked closer, his heart stopped. Standing right outside in the dark was the same tall man from the arena, shining a bright flashlight directly into his bedroom window. The boy let out a terrified scream, leaped out of bed, and ran straight into his parents' bedroom, crying that a man was standing at his window. His parents rushed outside and searched the yard for about 20 minutes, but they found absolutely nothing. Because he was only 6 years old, they assumed he had simply had a nightmare or had been startled by the passing headlights of a car. They did not believe him. A couple of days later, on New Year's Eve, the family was staying up late to watch the famous ball drop on television. They were only about 5 or 6 minutes away from midnight when the front doorbell suddenly rang. His parents went to answer the door. The young boy did not pay much attention at first, until he heard the voice of the person speaking to his parents. He was 100% certain it was the voice of the tall man from the arena. He ran to his parents and tried to explain that this was the man who had taken him to the upper levels of the stadium, but they brushed his fears aside. They told him the man was just a polite neighbor, handing out lost dog flyers for his cousin's pet. The rest of the night passed without incident, and the boy slowly tried to put the terrifying experience behind him. But a year later, on the very next New Year's Eve, the nightmare returned. The boy was lying in his bed when he heard a distinct, sharp knock directly on his bedroom window. He got up, slowly approached the glass, and saw a piece of paper taped to the outside. He pulled the note inside and read the chilling words written on it. The note said, "This new year, you will meet me again." Terrified, he ran to his parents and handed them the note. Realizing the danger was real, they immediately filed a police report, but unfortunately, they never heard anything back from the investigation. Over the years, the boy developed a deep, lingering fear of New Year's Eve, constantly terrified that the mysterious man would fulfill his promise and return. He told his parents he never wanted to go to another professional basketball game again, claiming he had simply lost interest in the sport. Now, at 16 years old, he still lives with the terrifying knowledge that a dangerous predator knows exactly where he lives, and he never ever leaves his bedroom curtains open. But the horror of the holiday season does not end there. A third, incredibly chilling incident occurred about 10 years ago, during the early days of December, in a remote mountain forest. The narrator, a father, along with his wife, Marianne, and their 7-year-old son, Andrew, decided to embark on a festive adventure. They wanted to drive up north into the mountains to cut down a real wild Christmas tree, something they had always dreamed of doing as a family. The weather that day was incredibly cold and overcast, with a heavy gray sky that looked as though it was about to drop a fresh layer of snow at any moment. For the family, this winter weather only added to the festive Christmas spirit. The winding drive up the mountain roads made the father feel like a young boy again, excited to share this special holiday memory with his young son. They eventually reached a remote forest area that Marianne had found online. The parking lot was completely empty, with no other vehicles in sight. The area was somewhat illuminated by a few scattered light posts, so they were not in total pitch-black darkness. This was one of the reasons they had chosen this specific location. Just in case, they had brought several strong flashlights. They parked their pickup truck near a small, unmarked trail that led deeper into the dense pine trees. The ground was covered in a thick layer of untouched snow from a storm a few days prior. Andrew was incredibly excited, jumping out of the truck and immediately throwing snowballs at his parents. The father laughed and threw them back, wanting to make the experience as fun and memorable as possible for his son. The father grabbed the heavy iron axe he had brought to chop down the tree, along with their flashlights. Together, the three of them began walking up the narrow, snowy path, their heavy winter boots crunching loudly in the quiet forest. Andrew ran ahead, pointing excitedly at various evergreen trees, asking if each one was the perfect Christmas tree. But as they walked deeper into the forest, the faint lights of the parking lot began to fade, and the only remaining light came from the dim moon, hidden behind the thick cloud cover. The silence of the forest was absolute. It was so quiet that the father asked everyone to stop for a second, just to listen to the stillness. There was not a single sound, save for a very light breeze rustling through the pine needles. The father admitted to himself that if he had been there alone, the sheer silence and darkness would have crept him out. They had to rely entirely on their flashlights to navigate the path. Andrew began to get visibly nervous as the darkness closed in. He asked how much further they had to go, clearly uncomfortable with how isolated they were. At the same time, the father began to experience a strange, prickling sensation on the back of his neck, as if they were being watched. He kept looking over his shoulder, but he saw nothing but the empty, snowy trail behind them. About 10 minutes into their hike, they found a beautiful clearing filled with tall, full pine trees. Andrew began running around them in circles, trying to find the absolute best one for their living room. Marianne stayed very close to her husband. She whispered to him that she wanted to pick a tree quickly because she was starting to feel very uneasy. The father agreed completely. The atmosphere had become incredibly tense and creepy. Right then, the quiet of the woods was broken by the sound of soft crunching in the snow behind them. The sound was distinct. It was not an animal, and it was not coming from any of them. It sounded like the slow, deliberate footsteps of someone trying to sneak up on them. The father spun around and shined his flashlight down the path. Standing about 20 feet away was a man dressed in dark, thin clothing. The man was clearly not dressed for the freezing mountain weather. He wore no gloves, and his bare hands were bright red from the cold. His jacket was a thin windbreaker, completely inadequate for the snow. His face was pale and stiff, looking as though he had been wandering out in the freezing cold for a very long time. Marianne quickly reached out and pulled Andrew close to her side. When the man realized the family was staring at him, a wide, deeply unsettling smile spread across his face, and he began to step closer. He asked them in a soft, deep voice if they were looking for a Christmas tree. The sound of his voice breaking the heavy silence was incredibly uncomfortable. Before the father could stop him, young Andrew excitedly answered yes. The father felt a sudden jolt of pure panic, not wanting this strange man to have any information about them. Marianne quickly spoke over her son, telling the man no, and claiming they were just out for a simple walk. The man took another step forward. The unnatural way he moved made the hair on the father's arms stand on end. He smiled even wider and told them not to worry, because he was not a park ranger. He said it with a knowing tone, as if he knew exactly why they were lying. Cutting down wild trees in this area was highly illegal, and the man seemed to be using that fact to play mind games with them. The father decided they needed to leave immediately. He told Marianne they were heading back to the car. She nodded quickly, gripping Andrew's jacket tightly. As they turned and began walking back down the path, the man stood there, smiling and nodding slowly, as if politely saying goodbye. But as they walked, Andrew kept looking back, asking why the man was following them. The father looked back and realized with horror that the man was indeed following them. He was keeping a consistent distance, but every time the father checked, the man seemed just a little bit closer, even though he did not appear to be rushing. He walked with a strange, dragging gait, as if his boots were far too heavy for him. The father whispered to Marianne that the moment they cleared the tree line and could see the parking lot, they needed to run for the truck. She gripped Andrew's hand even tighter and kept her eyes locked on the path ahead. The sound of the dragging boots followed them through the dark woods. Finally, they spotted the opening in the trees where the faint light of the parking lot was visible. The father told them to run. Marianne scooped Andrew up into her arms and ran as fast as she could through the snow. The father stayed slightly behind them, holding the heavy iron axe in his hand. It was the only thing that gave him a sense of security, though he had never used violence in his life and was terrified of the prospect. He turned around to face the path, preparing to defend his family. But the man had stopped walking. He stood at the edge of the dark trees, his hands raised halfway in the air, still wearing that bizarre, empty smile. The man looked at the father and told him he meant no harm, and suggested they get back to their truck now. The father felt his heart freeze. The man had used the word truck. He knew exactly what kind of vehicle they had driven up the mountain, even though the parking lot was not visible from where they had first encountered him. This meant the man had been watching them from the moment they arrived. The father quickly replied that they did not want any trouble, then turned and ran toward the parking lot to join his wife and son. But as he reached the truck, Marianne let out a panicked, terrified scream. The father rushed to her side, and she pointed down at the tires. Both of the passenger side tires on their pickup truck had been completely punctured and were entirely flat. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The man had slashed their tires while they were walking into the woods, trapping them in this remote mountain lot. The father told Marianne to call 911 immediately. Because they were high up in the mountains, her phone had no service. She began walking frantically around the snowy parking lot, searching for a single bar of reception, keeping close to the truck. Andrew was now crying in the back seat of the truck, fully aware that something was terribly wrong. Finally, Marianne found a weak signal and dialed the police. The connection was incredibly choppy and kept cutting out, so the father took the phone. He quickly explained their exact location, their flat tires, and the hostile, strange man who was stalking them in the woods. The operator understood the severity of the situation, especially with a young child present. She told the father that officers and a tow truck were being dispatched immediately, and instructed him to lock his family inside the truck and stay on the line. As they waited in the cold truck, the phone connection began to fail completely, static filling the speaker. Suddenly, Marianne let out another sharp scream and pointed toward the dark tree line near the path they had walked down. The father looked, and his blood ran cold. There were multiple figures standing just inside the shadow of the trees. He counted at least 3 distinct silhouettes. It looked as though they were being hunted by a group of people. Then, two of the figures began slowly walking out of the woods, heading directly toward the disabled truck. The third figure vanished back into the dark forest. The father frantically told the operator what was happening. The operator asked if he had any weapons. When he mentioned the axe, she told him to do whatever was necessary to defend his family. Andrew was sobbing in the back seat as Marianne desperately tried to comfort him. The two figures continued their slow, deliberate walk toward the truck. They did not run, and they did not yell. They walked with an eerie confidence, knowing the family had nowhere to go. The phone line dropped completely. The sudden silence in the truck was deafening. The father checked the door locks again, his hands shaking. He gripped the handle of the axe so tightly his knuckles turned white. As the two figures got closer, the father could hear them calling out, claiming they were there to help and waving their hands. But, as the light from the parking lot hit them, the father realized neither of them was the man they had met on the trail. Marianne whispered, asking if they could be park rangers. The father said absolutely not. They were dressed in the exact same dirty, inadequate clothing as the first man, seemingly unaffected by the freezing temperature. But then, just as they reached the edge of the parking lot, the two men suddenly spun around and began sprinting back into the dark woods. A second later, the family understood why. The faint sound of police sirens began to echo up the mountain road. The flashing red and blue lights appeared in the distance, growing larger and louder until a police sport utility vehicle roared into the parking lot, shining its bright spotlight across the snow. The father flashed his truck's headlights to get the officer's attention, pointing wildly toward the woods where the men had just fled. Two officers jumped out of the vehicle with their weapons and flashlights drawn. The father got out of the truck, practically falling to his knees in relief as he thanked them. The police instructed the family to stay warm inside the patrol car while they searched the area. Andrew's tears stopped, replaced by a child's excitement at the sight of the police cars. After a thorough search of the tree line, the officers returned with no suspects. They had found multiple sets of footprints leading deep into the mountains, but the tracks eventually split up in different directions, making them impossible to follow in the dark. The officers explained that the mountains were known to harbor drifters, squatters, and illegal campers who stayed hidden in remote areas during the winter months. A tow truck eventually arrived, and the police remained with the family until the pickup truck was safely loaded. The ride back down the mountain was completely silent. The family was too traumatized to speak, as if talking about the event would make it happen again. They never went back to that mountain, and they never tried to cut down a real Christmas tree again. 10 years later, the father still shudders at the memory. What terrifies him the most is the realization that the group had been watching them from the moment they parked. They had deliberately slashed the tires to trap them, waiting for the family to go deep enough into the woods so they could not escape. If they had not trusted their instincts and turned back when they did, they might never have made it out of those woods alive. But there is one final story that perfectly captures the terror of the holiday season, taking place when the narrator was 9 years old, just a few days before Christmas. His parents had both left him home alone for a brief period that evening. His mother had to run to the local grocery store to pick up some last-minute ingredients for their Christmas dinner, and his father was working late, which was very common for his job during the busy month of December. The 9-year-old boy was sitting comfortably on the living room couch, watching a festive holiday movie and eating Christmas cookies by the warm fireplace and the brightly lit tree. Outside, the night was dark and quiet. He could see the colorful holiday lights flashing on the houses across the street, creating a peaceful, normal winter scene. But then, the quiet was broken by the sharp ring of the front doorbell. The sound immediately made him freeze. It was quite late in the evening, and it was highly unusual for anyone to visit their home unannounced at that hour. Furthermore, his mother had strictly instructed him never to answer the door for anyone when he was home alone. His parents, of course, had their own keys and would never need to ring the bell to get inside. Curiosity and fear warred inside him, and he slowly got up from the couch, and tiptoed to the front entryway. He stood on his tiptoes to peer through the small glass peephole in the center of the door. When he looked through, his eyes widened. Standing on the front porch was a man dressed in a complete bright red Santa Claus suit. He had the entire outfit: the heavy red coat, the matching hat, the white belt, and the bushy white beard. But something about his appearance was deeply unsettling. He did not look like a friendly, jolly Santa. He was standing incredibly close to the door, almost pressing against it, and he was holding a simple wooden clipboard in his hands. The boy did not know what to do. In a quiet, trembling voice, he whispered, asking who was there. The man on the porch leaned his head closer to the door, straining to hear the voice through the thick wood. In that instant, the stranger realized a young child was on the other side of the door. The man immediately put on a deep, booming voice, attempting a jolly Santa Claus impression. He told the boy that he was Santa, that he had brought special gifts for him, and that the boy needed to unlock and open the door right away. But the 9-year-old boy was smart. He had stopped believing in Santa Claus years ago, and his parents had thoroughly prepared him for the dangers of strangers. He tried to make his voice sound as brave and strong as possible, telling the man to go away because he did not need any gifts, but his voice cracked under the intense fear. The man on the porch went completely silent for a moment, and then his tone changed. He asked the boy if he was home all by himself. The moment those words left the man's mouth, the boy realized he had made a terrible mistake by responding at all. He had confirmed to a stranger that someone was inside the house. He did not answer. He backed away from the door as quietly as possible and ran back to the living room, his heart pounding in his chest. He sat back down on the couch, grabbing a throw pillow and staring blankly at the television screen, desperately hoping that if he ignored the man, the threat would simply go away. But then, he heard a sound that made his stomach drop. It was the distinct metallic sound of the front door handle being slowly twisted and turned from the outside. The stranger was testing the lock. The boy wanted to scream for help, but there was no one there to hear him. He clutched the pillow to his chest, praying the lock would hold. A moment later, he heard another sound, this time coming from the very back of the house. It was the sound of the back door handle being twisted. The realization was terrifying. The man in the Santa suit had run around the perimeter of the house to try the secondary entrance. The back door was much weaker than the heavy front door, and the family rarely used it, meaning it was far more vulnerable to a break-in. The boy felt completely frozen, realizing this predator was actively searching for any unlocked entry point into his home. He forced his legs to move, running into the kitchen to grab the family cordless phone. With shaking fingers, he dialed his mother's cell phone number. When she answered, the boy burst into tears, speaking incredibly fast as he explained that a man dressed as Santa Claus was trying to break into their house through the doors. His mother's tone shifted instantly from casual to absolute panic. She told him she was leaving the store and driving home immediately, and ordered him to keep the doors locked and find a place to hide. She told him to stay away from the windows and keep the curtains tightly drawn. The boy ran back to the living room, dropped to the floor, and squeezed himself into the narrow space behind the couch, where he was completely hidden from view. He lay there on the carpet, trying to control his breathing. He could hear faint, shuffling footsteps and light tapping sounds against the exterior walls of the house, indicating the intruder was still lurking outside. Finally, the sounds stopped. A short while later, the familiar squeaking of his mother's car brakes echoed in the driveway. The boy stayed in his hiding spot until he heard the front door lock click, and his mother burst into the house, slamming the door shut behind her. She was carrying 2 grocery bags and was visibly out of breath. She locked the deadbolt and called out his name. The boy scrambled out from behind the couch and threw his arms around her, crying with relief. His mother held him tightly and explained that as she was speeding down their street, she had spotted a man dressed in a full Santa Claus suit, walking quickly along the sidewalk away from their house. She had slowed her vehicle down, rolled down the window, and screamed at him, demanding to know what he was doing on her property. The man had looked incredibly nervous and claimed he was simply going door to door to collect holiday donations for a local charity. but his mother did not believe a single word. She continued to yell at him until the man turned and walked away at a brisk pace, disappearing into the dark neighborhood. She praised her son for his quick thinking, for keeping the doors locked, and for calling her immediately instead of opening the door. She called the police and provided a detailed description of the suspect. The officers surveyed the neighborhood, but the man had already vanished. Later that evening, 2 different neighbors confirmed that the same man in the Santa suit had knocked on their doors, asking for donations, which they had suspected was a holiday scam. But for the 9-year-old boy, the reality was far more sinister. The man had not simply knocked on his door to ask for money. He had actively attempted to manipulate a child into opening the door, and had then tried to force his way inside through both the front and back entrances. Now, as an adult, the narrator still feels a chill whenever he sees Santa Claus decorations during the holidays. He knows how incredibly lucky he was, that his parents had taught him the importance of locking the doors and staying cautious. If that back door had been left unlocked, his childhood holiday memory would have ended in an absolute tragedy. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments. And remember, we have a whole playlist of true crime episodes ready for you to binge right now. Until next time, see ya.